So what does this all mean? When you start thinking about it. Well, what it means is not, when it comes to software development, one size doesn't always fit all, right? And so that's really not what we're looking at. So I have a hypothesis in this. That maybe, just maybe, the makeup of the team is more important than the approach used to implement the project. And when I talk about approach, I mean methodology, framework, language, technology, those types of things. Maybe the approach is the problem. So you might be sitting out there going, "Bull, Mike. This is not, I've had really good success." And it's like, "Good. Well, maybe you don't agree with me, or you don't believe in the chaos report, right? Those numbers could be baked, as they always say, or their methodology is slanted in such a way to make it look worse than what it is." All right. Maybe you've had great success with a particular approach. Maybe every Agile project you've been on has been seamless and flawless, and it just delivers every single time. Maybe you've been so fortunate in your career that you were never on a death march project, and if you were, that's cool. Maybe you're the luckiest person in the world that every project approach and technology you've ever used has worked perfectly. And if that's the case, I really do want to shake your hand, because you've lived a blessed life. And that's really, really something, and it should be applauded. There are other numbers around projects and delivery that are out there that support this concept. And you might ask yourself, what other numbers are there? Well, there are a ton of them, right? Some of these are older, some of these are newer, but 61% fail, 41% fail, 7 out of 10 projects fail, 16% success rate, 18% developer costs identifying, correcting defects, 62% failed to meet their schedules, 33% failed to perform against expectations, 50% are rolled out of production, 30% fail from the European Union. So there are a lot of numbers out there showing that project success rates have not been increasing over the years, and every year we come up with these new methodologies, new frameworks, new languages, and we still have the same rate of failure. That's an interesting question to me. And don't even think about how much time is being wasted teaching and instructing and trying to get people to do the proper approach that we want to do this project so that we can implement it this way. I mean, the numbers are just staggering. So if it's not one of these things like the language, the framework, or methodology, then what could it be? Well, the common ones are management. You could have some management issues. Team members could have some requirements, project complexity, and the classic unknown answers. So let's break this down a little bit. Management, right? We all have great management. Has your management lost confidence in what you're doing, right? You haven't been able to deliver on time, on budget, with no surprises. The project kicked off and it was canceled. There's a working solution in place, so this really isn't that critical. Politically, the project doesn't have a future, right? Management's not really behind it, and there really isn't a killer ROI. Business change, right? We have all kinds of things in business change. We're all going 10,000 miles per hour. We just don't know where we're heading, right? Destination is unknown, and we have a new product, new direction. Or we get the classic new manager in who cancels everything from the prior manager because they also want to introduce their way of doing it, which may include new technology, framework, or methodology. And for some odd reason, and I haven't figured this one out yet, but good numbers on management, right, are really hard to find. So by management changing their mind or being indecisive, it's really hard to kind of find numbers to say how big of a problem this area could be in project development and application delivery. So the next thing is team members, right? You can sometimes have too many rock stars on your team. That happens, and sometimes there's clashes, just like there are in rock bands. There's too many dinosaurs on your team. Heck, I'm starting to feel myself as a dinosaur anymore. And so I might be that guy. You have some dogmatic people on your team that, believe differently about direction of the company or methodology, technology, or management situations. You have one or more not cutting the new technology. You know what? We've decided we're going to go JavaScript, Node.js, and darn it, we're going that way. And the other guy doesn't believe that. Or you have somebody going outside the project, right? As I said, we're doing everything with JavaScript, and I've got this one area that this guy goes out and writes it in COBOL just to get it done. And so that can cause some issues long term and short term. And there are a ton of others with regards to team members. Requirements. This is where it gets interesting because requirements have been pretty well studied that show that bad requirements cause problems, right? Anywhere from 20 to 25% of the project failures are requirements related. The average project overrun on budget is about 189% and about 225% from a schedule perspective, and that's from 1995. Requirements errors account for 70 to 80% of the rework out there. 71% project failures. And we can just keep on going down. And as we get closer and closer to the time that we're at, gaps in technical requirements account for more than 70% of program problems. That's the United States Government Accountability Office in 2008. The next one is one of my favorites because it's unknown answers, and maybe the solution is unknown. There's a lot of times when we are given projects that we have to deliver that we know and understand step A, right? We understand step A. We know and understand step C. Step B is a little bit fuzzy for us, and we're not really sure what that step B really means. And so when we think about that a little bit, sometimes the project's a little bit bigger in concept, and there's areas that we just don't understand. I think this classic cartoon really explains it. It shows two professors sitting there, and he's explaining this great equation to him, and it comes up, and the one professor says to the other professor, I think you should be a little bit more explicit in step 2. Well, step 2, if you can't read it, it says, then the miracle occurs, right? And so sometimes in software development and application development, sometimes we don't know the answer or how to do something, and we have to develop it. And that's a real unknown, and that becomes really fuzzy when you're trying to define what the project and when the project's going to be delivered on time. Project complexity. No matter what project I've ever been on, how do you calculate and estimate for project needs? Every project I've been on has always wanted more of X. And X could represent all kinds of things, right? Developers, testers, resources of general consultants, time, approach, money, etc. You name it, there's a need for something, right? And I call the project complexity the vortex of hell, because no matter where you're at the beginning of the project or the end of the project, there's always a need, and that's always interesting to me. So remember, methodologies themselves can be complex for teams, right? That can add an additional amount of complexity. I know this one team that was a CMMI level 3 compliant company, and basically the rules were so strict that hardly any code ever got written. And it wasn't that the project was complex, and the project, but project management basically made it so the developers could not get anything introduced, and the complexity of the methodology really introduced the problems to the project. Beware of the snake oil, right? You always got to beware of the snake oil. Dogma and methodology save projects. How many of us have ever been on a project that somebody came in and said, hey, if we just do this, we'll save this project? Adding resources late to a project will get it done on time. I know everyone hearing my voice today has been on a project where at 3 months to delivery, or a month before delivery, or 2 weeks before delivery, let me bring in Bob, Sally, Sue, John, Bob, you name the group of people. Let me add them to the project, and you guys can bring this one home. Normally that doesn't always work very well. So adding new resources sometimes, or adding more people, doesn't solve the problem, and it doesn't help the project getting done. Now, there are times when you can bring in key individuals, right? One resource or maybe two resources that have specific knowledge that can bring a project or bring it back up into scope and bring it back in on time, but very seldom. Only a technology will work. In my career, I used to believe this, that only a technology could work, but over the years I've just seen too many technologies, good and bad, be able to produce things that you would never think of. I once talked to a gentleman who was very, very confident, and I do believe him, that he could write a air traffic control program in Excel. And Would that be the best technology for building an air traffic control system? I don't think so, but with enough time and money, I'm sure he could develop a aircraft control system written in Excel. It's just the way the world works. And always be kind of leery of salespeople when they say, hey, I've got the silver bullet in the box, you'll be the hero. Sometimes that's true, but most likely it's not. And remember one other thing, open source is not free, and it is not bug free. And when you bring in open source into a project, you are bringing a large portion of code that you're now responsible for. And some of these large portions of code, how many people in hearing my voice right now could actually bring down the Apache project, compile it completely, and if there was a bug someplace in it, could actually go into the Apache project and find the bug and fix the bug and put it into production? I would imagine not very many people hearing my voice have that knowledge. And if you do, you're probably on the Apache dev team anyways, working on it and making sure it's bug free and has the latest security features and all that. But what I'm trying to say is if you bring an open source project in, just remember, it's not free. It has to be managed, and a lot of times there are even bugs in open source, and those things have to be managed also with inside of a project. And remember, frameworks and templates always have a hidden agenda. They really do. You need to know what that agenda is. Now, some people might say, hey Mike, JSP doesn't have an agenda. Well, it did have an agenda, and it was a response to ASP back in the day. Another one from today would be Spring, right, or Hibernate. There is a distinct need of what these frameworks and technologies are trying to do for you, and they do have an agenda, and you just have to understand that agenda and understand the risk that that agenda brings to your project, right?